Hello and welcome back to Pop Culture Graveyard. I am Hollis, and this week I'm going to talk a little bit about Johnny Thunders and the Heartbreakers. So first off, this episode is dedicated to the late great Walter Lohr, co-lead guitarist and co-lead vocalist with Johnny Thunders in his Heartbreakers. Walter was a very underrated ingredient in the Heartbreakers sound. More often than not, when things would fall apart on stage, and they often did, heroin, it would be Walter who was keeping the song rolling. Also, if you do the math, Walter was the Heartbreakers' principal songwriter. He wrote a bunch of songs on his own, he wrote a bunch of songs with Jerry Nolan, and he wrote one or two with Johnny. Johnny usually wrote alone, if at all. And although Johnny's songs may have been a lot more interesting, they couldn't just walk out there every night and play 5 songs. So Walter was damn necessary for the Heartbreakers, and he was a big part of their success, such as it is. So first, for the uninitiated, a little bit of a quick history lesson. So when guitarist Johnny Thunders and drummer Jerry Nolan quit the Death Rattle Dolls in 1975 down in Florida and hiked up to New York, it happened to coincide with Richard Hell being ousted / quitting Television, another great band on the New York scene at that time. So those three got together and they added Walter Lohr, who was this tall drink of water who was playing guitar with a band called the Demons. According to Jerry, he was just this kid from Brooklyn who always wanted to be in the Dolls. So 1975 saw the first live gigs by the Hell Thunders fronted Heartbreakers. Most of these live songs were taken from a set at CBGB's, with 3 tracks taken from a live set at a club called Mother's, which used to be down the street from the Chelsea Hotel. This LP, What Goes Around, came out on Bomp Records in 1991 on beautiful red vinyl. It's also available on CD. Pick a format, any format. The sound on this is pretty good. It was taken from 8-track masters. It's fascinating to hear this early version of the band. Hell is already a star. His song, Blank Generation, was already well known on the scene through the early years of television. You Gotta Lose, New Pleasure, and Love Comes in Spurts are the other Hell classics that are on here. The difference between the Hell songs here and the Hell songs on the Voidoids album is that they're much more rock and roll here. They're punchier, he's got real muscle behind him, and it sounds like he's having real fun with the boys here. And he's finally in a band where his style of bass playing fits in perfectly. He had a real powerful, thudding, jump around bass style that was a little too theatrical and sloppy for television, but right here it's mother's milk. To break it down to its essence, Richard Hell brought a lyrical grace to the band and a real iconic front persona to the band. The Heartbreakers brought Hell street cred and muscle and rock and roll chops. So it was a really winning combination for the year to a year and a half that Hell was in the band. But it was Hell bringing most of the new material. One of the Johnny songs on here, Pirate Love, which is an all-time favorite for me, dates way back to the Death Rattle era of the New York Dolls when they were doing the Red Patent Leather tour. So Johnny wasn't getting a ton of new songs written. The other classic Johnny song on here already in 75 is So Alone. The things you love about the song are already in place. When Johnny would write a song and he got it how he wanted it, it would never change, it seems. His delivery of the song may change, but the dynamics of that song will go through very, very few changes over the years. One last track I want to talk about on this album is a song called Flight. It is one that Walter Lohr wrote, and it was the one song that Richard Hell would allow him to sing. Now, saying that, Richard would also sing on top of him. Still, you can hear Walter here. This version of Flight almost sounds like a Byrds outtake. It's got a very jangly 60s poppy guitar. It's actually my favorite version of Flight, so it's a highlight for me. And if you're a Walter Lohr fan, I think you should hear this. Hearing Richard Hell on Hurt Me is fantastic here. You really got to check that out. Anyone else who wants more of the Hell Thunders Heartbreakers, I suggest that you search here on YouTube for Yonkers Demos Heartbreakers. It's back when they were just getting it together. It's hard for people to trust junkies, so many record labels were scared off. But you hear the Yonkers demos, and they just sound fantastic. But there's a looseness here that I think captures them in a much more accurate light than those demos. So I highly recommend What Goes Round. This lineup, however, with these two strong frontmen, was not going to last, so a band shakeup happened next. But it wasn't heroin that drove the band apart, it was egos. Now, people always say that Richard Hell quit the Heartbreakers, or Richard Hell was fired from the Heartbreakers. But the truth is that Johnny Thunders, who was sick and tired of Richard Hell trying to turn the rest of the band into his sidemen, quit the band. And Jerry Nolan and Walter Lohr followed Johnny. So they wound up getting a new bass player, Billy Rath. Unlike the rest of the band, who are now all addicted to heroin, Billy Rath was into methamphetamines. So the band actually got healthier? Paging Dr. Feelgood, this new version of the Heartbreakers got tighter and tighter. They ended up going to England on the Anarchy Tour, supporting the Clash and the Pistols. When that tour fell apart, they wound up getting a record deal with Track Records. Thanks to The Who, I can only say Track Records. So they got a deal with Track Records. They recorded an album, l.a.m.f, Like a Motherfucker, gang term for marking your territory. And when they put out the album, it sounded like crap. It was a muddy mix. It was a mastering default, and all of their records were affected by it. They tried to get a different mix. They went to like 5 different studios to try and get a different mix. They thought it was the mix. And they would hear it and it would sound good, and then they'd get it mastered and it would sound like crap. And they went through that over and over and over again. And so Jerry Nolan was like, listen, if you put out that album with that mix, there's no reason for me to be in the band anymore. So they put it out and Jerry left. Finally, years later in the 90s, I get l.a.m.f, the Lost 77 Mixes. This, for my money, is the best it's ever sounded. It's powerful, and it's the way the band wanted to sound. It's criminal that for so many years, while Johnny and Jerry were alive, the album sounded like utter crap. That was their legacy. Supposedly the original cassette sounded the best, but for my money, look for the Lost 77 Mixes. It came out on Jungle Records, and it comes with an MPEG video for PC and Mac with Chinese rocks on it, video enhanced disc. This album sells itself when you hear it the way it's intended. Kicks off with Born to Lose, their signature tune, and pretty much the theme song to Johnny's life. The lyrics go, living in the jungle, it ain't so hard. Living in the city, it'll eat out your heart. Fucking A, Johnny. Song Baby Talk, when you hear crisply and cleanly what Jerry is doing on the drums on Baby Talk, you understand why he was so angry about the muddy mix. The drumming is heavy but deft, it's vibrant, and it stops on a dime. To me, that's one of Jerry's highlights on this album. All by Myself, written by Walter Lohr and Jerry Nolan, one of Waldo's signature tunes. Walter really was known for that song more than most others, and it was always a live favorite. Lots of people covered it, and it sounds great here. It's Not Enough may be my favorite track on the whole album. Johnny's whiny vocal is pitch perfect here. It's got chiming guitars, a steady beat, rubbery bass, and then Walter plays this fantastic solo. He doesn't overplay. He never overplays. He serves the song, and it's just beautiful. It's a little bit evocative to me of like a 60s production on it too, which really was the right decision. Get Off the Phone is like a drumming clinic. Jerry Nolan is so on it on that song. Walter sings it. It's only 2 minutes. It sounds like Chuck Berry on speed. Maybe Billy Rath hooked them up. Pirate Love is on here. It's my second favorite track on the album. The Old Dolls, Chestnut. Pirate Love sounds fantastic here. There's such space on that track. Jerry holds it down deliciously. Johnny's sloppy solo is just right. When the guitars drop out, the rhythm section shines. It's pure perfection. It speeds up, it slows down, but they all do it together. The Heartbreakers were never tighter. It's just a phenomenal track. It's a beautifully recorded studio version of Pirate Love, at long last. One Track Mind is on here, sung by Walter. He's one of those tracks that people think they stole a Richard Hell song, because basically, a few minor musical changes aside, It is Love Comes in Spurts with different lyrics. So people think the Heartbreakers ripped off Richard Hell. They did not. Richard Hell did the lyrics to Love Comes in Spurts, but Walter Lohr came up with the music. And when Richard Hell left the band, Walter Lohr was like, well, shit, I wrote this great music, let me change the lyrics. So he created a new song out of that. So it is his song, and it's a pretty good job of it. I Love You by Johnny. It's a sweet little underrated song, and it just points out that Johnny Thunders was a romantic. A flawed, pathetic, fucked up romantic, but a romantic. Goin' Steady here has a ramshackle charm. Let Go is another rocker, written by Johnny and Jerry. And Lohr and Nolan wrote Can't Keep My Eyes on You, which was one of the songs that drove Richard Hell nuts. Because he was like, I don't understand, Can't Keep My Eyes on You? What the fuck is that about? Lyrics aside, the song has a great Johnny Thunders solo on it, so it's a worthy addition. Very briefly about Chinese Rocks. The song Chinese Rocks was written by Dee Dee Ramone. One stanza was written by Richard Hell to help Dee Dee complete the song. So Richard Hell brought it to the Heartbreakers, but it was always credited to Dee Dee Ramone and Richard Hell. And then later, it started being credited to Richard Hell, Dee Dee Ramone, Johnny Thunders, and Jerry Nolan. Jerry and Johnny knew a great song when they saw one, but they had absolutely nothing to do with the writing of the song. They were the first to get it out, and it sounds phenomenal. The Ramones didn't want it anyway, because Johnny Ramone said no drug songs. Glue is not a drug. Later he changed his mind when they kept searching for a hit, and he was like, why not? Go ahead. It's very much a Heartbreakers song. It's one of their signature tunes, and it's never better here. Suffice it to say, if this album had come out sounding like it does on the Lost 77 mixes, their entire recorded legacy might have been different, and their lives might have been different. Probably not, because heroin, but I wish the members of the band could have heard the album in their heyday the way I can hear it now. So Like a Motherfucker comes out, and it stiffs. Everybody who reviews it says, yeah, the band were great. You can hear that they're great songs, and the band's performances are good, but it sounds like crap. So how can you recommend buying it? So Jerry Nolan leaves the band over the bad mix with l.a.m.f. Johnny Thunders gets his solo deal with Real Records and puts out this album that comes out in '78, So Alone. It's a masterpiece, but not one to be appreciated in its day. Also in 1978, Johnny, Walter, and Billy get together with a drummer named Ty Sticks, and they play sold-out shows. They would come out on this album called Live at Max's Kansas City, '79, when in fact they were recorded on September 16th, 1978. This album, put out on Max's Kansas City Records, is fantastic. It's everything that l.a.m.f. was supposed to be. Jerry's out, Ty Sticks is in. He does a credible job. He does a great job on some tracks, except for All By Myself. He starts playing a different song in the beginning and they have to stop it. But this delivers. This is the band firing on all cylinders. And you have it all here. Even their intro. They used to enter the stage to the sound of sirens and horns blaring and gunfire. And that would set the stage for what was about to happen. The band launched into Milk Me, which is actually a version of Chatterbox. Often Johnny would like to create the illusion of a new song simply by changing its title and or changing the lyrics. So that's what happens here. But Johnny gets so lost in the performance that at one point he begins singing the lyrics to Chatterbox instead of the lyrics to Milk Me, which is fun. So that's a fantastic opening. They go into Chinese Rocks, which here is credited to Johnny and Jerry along with Richard and Dee Dee. At one point down the line, they'd even drop the credit for Richard and Dee Dee. So at least here they're trying to be equanimous. Is that a word? Get Off the Phone here is a highlight of the album. And that's not one of my favorite songs. It's played at breakneck speed, and it's very, very good. And it also underlines the fact that Walter was a co-frontman with Johnny. That really comes through on this album. I Want to Be Loved is another highlight for me. And the album ends on Do You Love Me, a song written by Berry Gordy, which is an interesting choice. And they do a great version here. So bottom line, this is a great album. This got the acclaim and the reviews that l.a.m.f. was supposed to get. And this is the album that most people were buying when they wanted to hear the Heartbreakers. If someone wants live Heartbreakers, this is the album you turn them on to. Now, after the success of the Heartbreakers at Max's album, the owner of Max's Kansas City at the time, Tommy Dean, wanted to do a second volume. So he booked the band in again. This time they had Jerry Nolan back in the fold, but he was only there as a hired hand. Everyone was excited. They booked a few shows for them, and due to technical problems and drug problems, only the first half of the last show was salvageable. 4 tracks. What happened on that night was that the band was playing great. They played about 4 songs, and then Johnny went off stage to tune up. And he never came back. So Tommy had these few tracks. So he went to the record label Beggars Banquet and asked if they want to put out an EP with these tracks. And Beggars Banquet literally said, nobody listens to that music anymore. Tommy put out a new version of that album, and it's got the bonus tracks tacked onto it. So we have Pirate Love, Too Much Junkie Business, Don't Mess with Cupid, and So Alone. The bonus tracks with Jerry on them are like a punch in the face. It's a fatter sound. Pirate Love, one of my all-time faves. The drumming is fantastic. Of course it is. Jerry's muscle memory is killing it on that song. It's great hearing Johnny call out Jerry. He calls him my compadre in chief. He's been with him longer than any girlfriend he's ever had. He makes a little sweet statement about Jerry, which is nice to hear. The bonus track, Too Much Junkie Business, is great here. It's a song written by Walter Lohr. Introducing the song on this, Johnny says it was written by Bo Diddley, Chuck Berry, and Waldo. He doesn't mention himself, even though later Johnny would put his name on that song. Walter Lohr later, who wasn't angry about it, said very matter-of-factly, Johnny always wished he'd written that song, so he put his name on it. It was just his way. I think Johnny identified so much with that song, and it was so much a Johnny Thunders song, I think he couldn't believe he didn't write it. And then later, I think he truly believed he wrote it. It's like O.J. killing those people. It's like O.J. does not believe at this point that he killed... Why would you bring up O.J.? The highlight here, the last bonus track, and the last track on this album, So Alone. This is the best version. If this was the only track they had gotten that night, it would have been worth it. In the beginning, either Walter or Johnny start playing Jet Boy. I think it's Walter, because Johnny kind of is like, what are you doing? It's really nice hearing that little false start to Jet Boy. My favorite part of this version of So Alone is when Johnny says, okay, Walter, and then Walter unleashes this anguished guitar solo that totally pushes the emotional core of the song forward. So this is the version of So Alone that's my favorite. There's a couple more live albums I want to mention. DTK, the Heartbreakers live at the Speakeasy. DTK stands for Down to Kill, while they were in England and while they were recording l.a.m.f. Track Records recorded this live show at the Speakeasy. This was recorded on March 15th, 1977 on a mobile unit by their producer Speedy Keen. It was on Jungle Records. This is a kick-ass album. When I would DJ, I would play this version of Chinese Rocks because I feel like it has a power and a rawness to it. This entire album is so stripped down and it's really dynamic. There's no overdubs. There's nothing on top of them. It's just plugged into the mobile. And this is the show you would see if you were at the Speakeasy that night. So I'm a big, big fan of this album. As Walter Lohr has said many times, every time Johnny really needed money, he would get the Heartbreakers back together because they could draw a lot more people than he could alone. To wit, 1984, Johnny Thunders and the Heartbreakers live at the Lyceum. This, for me, is the last great Heartbreakers live album. Even this is hit or miss, but anything beyond these years, Johnny was oftentimes more miss than hit. As for the Heartbreakers as a unit, this for me is their swan song. The version of In Cold Blood on here, I love. Listen to In Cold Blood off this album, and you tell me if they couldn't still turn it up to 11. Pipeline is great. Pipeline he would usually begin shows with is stellar here. And they play Personality Crisis. How much fun is that? Johnny just sets about owning his past and playing Personality Crisis. This version is raucous and fun, and for a moment it brings back that Dolls magic, that optimism and fun, and it's a great rendition. Other great songs are here: Born Too Loose, as in Born to Lose, One Track Mind, Too Much Junkie Business, all the favorites. Just Because I'm White has not aged well. 7 Day Weekend is another fun song. that brings you back to the Dolls days when they would do Gary U.S. Bond songs. And it ends with another anguished, wonderful version of So Alone. You hear all sorts of stuff on here too. Johnny's talking up a storm. Between songs, in songs, over songs. And if you listen real closely, you can hear Johnny. Yep, you can hear him combing his hair. There are a lot of other recordings of Johnny's solo out there. Some are good, some are downright horrible. And a lot of them have to do with his dosage and the health he was in, the band he was playing with, so many variables. If you want a Johnny solo live album that maybe you haven't heard that is really good, I suggest Belfast Rocks. This is Johnny in Ireland, Northern Ireland. There are great Johnny songs on here. MIA, Talk About You, Alone in a Crowd, You Can't Put Your Arms Around a Memory, Sad Vacation. It just keeps on kicking. And there's no less than 3 versions of Chinese rocks on here. Because the band were playing, it was getting late, and everyone kept applauding and cheering and wanting encores. So they kept coming out, and after a while, this band with them didn't know any other songs except Chinese rock, so they just keep playing it. It's a really glorious victory of a show for Johnny. And I think it's one that you should check out if you want to hear some live Johnny solo. Johnny and Jerry would continue to play together over the years, like an old married couple that just couldn't quit each other. And sometimes the shows were quite good, and sometimes they were recorded, even on video, such as here, where you get Thunders, Kane, and Nolan. That's right, Johnny and Jerry, together with Arthur Killer Kane, live January 4th, 1987 at the Roxy. The 3 Dolls play really, really well together. Personality Crisis is the only Dolls song that all 3 play. But there's plenty else here. There's some interesting covers like Eve of Destruction, Green Onions, In the Midnight Hour, Play with Fire by the Stones. It's great stuff here. And the theme to Courageous Cat and Minute Mouse, the cartoon, which the New York Dolls used to play way back when they first began. So that's kind of a fun thing they're hearkening back to. But anyway, you can't always find these things on DVD. So this is something to be cherished. Thanks for joining me this week on Pop Culture Graveyard. I'm going to go get myself some methadone, and I'll see you next week with a lot more cool stuff.